As we look at this, you see that what we have is a challenge to the thinking. And what we're saying is that a person's actions really begins with the thoughts that they think. And it's based on Romans 12:2. The fact that if we're really going to present ourselves to God, a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is our spiritual or reasonable service, then it says that you be transformed by the renewing of your minds. And it's after that. There's another scripture verse that's kind of basic to this that says, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So it's after that concept that we're dealing. Because traditionally, for example, the system has been almost always into behavior. You want out early, change your behavior. And you see the futility of that when you look at the fact that people can change their behavior long enough to get out. But the idea is that if you challenge their thinking, it increases the ability to work with a whole person. It's my bias that this has happened, that historically the church has worked with changing one's belief, and that the system has worked with changing behavior. The system is moving in the direction of recognizing you've got to challenge in a cognitive area. I think this provides opportunity for the church to connect the belief with the thinking and feeling and behavior. It kind of reminds you when you get here of the fact that sometimes you get into these mind-challenging things and you're kind of like turning on the computer, as I finally learned how to do the other day. And on the computer it said, "Welcome to the mental health hotline. If you're obsessive compulsive, punch 1 and 2 repeatedly. If you're multiple personality, punch 1, 4, 7, and 17. If you're codependent, please have someone else punch number 2. If you're paranoid delusional, stay on the line. We know who you are and why you called. And we'll soon be with you. And if you're depressed, punch any number you want to. Nobody cares anyway." One of the things you're doing and challenging is you got to break through the fact that some of the things you're challenging them about, we fall into also. And so what my son did was take this and rewrite it in such a way that we ask some of the questions they ask and see if we can't ask them in such a way that by the end of the thing, they're identifying and we're identifying with them. What's this going to do for me? Now, especially in dealing with the youth, they will know, what am I doing here? What's this class got to do with me? And does it have anything to do with me anyway? Do your clients often ask that about any program that's started? Okay. Have you ever? And you'll see here, have you ever got in trouble for the same thing more than once? Does that fit your clients? Okay. Have you ever not understood what made you do something? Did something that you didn't want to do and regretted it later? Got any hands on that? You got some heads nodding anyway. Okay. Not listen to good advice because you were angry. Okay. We're getting closer to home now, right? Have you ever blamed somebody or something else for things that were really your fault? My wife does that. Okay. Have you ever tried to make up with somebody you hurt without apologizing? Okay. Been proud of yourself for doing something you know is wrong, but you were slick. You got by with it. You were proud of it. You quit at something you had been doing really well. You got anybody so far? You got another one there. Tried to quit the same habit more than once. That'll get most of us, will it not? Or maybe you've done other things. We're not through the list yet. Just maybe you spent money you needed for bills on getting high. Okay? You'd done something you knew was crazy or dangerous just to prove you weren't scared. Okay? Went off on somebody or got in a fight because somebody dissed you. You got clients like that? Well, I had to hit him. He dissed me. failed a urine test because you thought you could beat it. Okay. Tried to get away with something by being Mr. Slick. Any clients like that? Treated someone like an object to be used however you wanted to. Now, did anybody answer yes to any of these? The rest of you are liars. Okay, if you answered yes to any of these questions, guess what? This class is for you. And what you will see is that all of these are tied to certain thinking areas. But all of us are guilty, not to the same extent or degree, which leads us to a continuum. Everybody is on that continuum somewhere between being super dysfunctional and super responsible. And all of us, none of us are 100% on the responsible side, and hopefully none of us are 100% on the dysfunctional side. But in order to get on one side or the other, there are certain thinking patterns that go with that. And the kind of thinking that gets us in trouble are when we get upset, we focus on our rights. Have you got clients who are constantly focusing on their rights? Hello. I never went to jail, but what I could tell you about my rights. I remember arguing with a cop about I had a right to walk the white line. He said, well, man, I had to help you down here. I suppose he was telling the truth because I thought we were going upstairs and we were going down. But you have all kinds of rights when you're messed up like that. I remember another occasion when two boys picked me up. I'd fell on the road and they picked me up, took me in my automobile. You're not going to drive home, are you? Sure, I got a right to drive home. I'm too drunk to walk. You always have rights. And your clients always has rights. Falling out of the top cell one time and took the cell away from the boy beneath me because I had a right to his cell because I didn't need to fall out again. You have all kinds of rights. And you're living life for the thrill and excitement. Most of the clients got there living for the thrill. They had an attitude of what I want and when I want it. And I got a right to do whatever I feel like doing. They're constantly going for the quick and easy. Does that describe the kind of thinking that got your client in the situation that he or she is in? Okay. Almost always, you find that that's focused on me and now. The kind of thinking that gets you in trouble is the kind of thought that's focused on me and now. Me getting what I want when I want it. Crime can be defined as solving problems without proper regard for others. Now, if we take a serious look at crime and contrast it with the golden rule, you'll see that on one side of the continuum, you have crime. And on the other side of the continuum, you have the golden rule. 2,000 years ago, a man told us how to live without crime in our life. And almost always, if we apply that, we have the two extremes. On the one side, crime is about me and now, rights, me getting what I want when I want it, what I feel like, going for the quick and easy. And sometimes they'll come to my class and they'll say, this is not easy. And I say there are two words that you will not hear in my class, not often. One is easy and the other is fair. And the reason you won't hear easy is I work in a lot of prisons. And I ask them how they got there. And everybody tells me it was easy. Do you want what easy brings? And the other thing is, you have to get over the fact that life ain't fair. I say to my clients, life ain't fair, get over it. The sooner you get over it, the less unfair it'll be to you. But the more that you continue with bickering about it not being unfair, or about it being unfair, the more unfair it will become. I tell my clients the only fair they'll ever get to see is the state fair. And they have to have a ticket to get to it. So life ain't fair, let's get over it. On this side, you have my responsibility. We take life one step at a time. We realize that life works better when there's appropriate consideration of others. We realize even in this lifestyle there are no guarantees, that sometimes you can take it one step at a time, you can give your best, and you don't get that break. There was no guarantee that you'd get that break. And you live life with goals and objectives. On this side, for example, you'll see that your life is driven by energy, and over here it's achievement by effort. Now these two do not always conflict, but when energy conflicts with effort, we have to go with effort. And if you don't believe that, let me ask you this. Did your energy and effort conflict with you when you got out of the bed this morning?
Yes.
Hello. And when you came to class at 1 o'clock? And before you get through my class, you'll have to put forth a lot of effort just to get through it. But achievement in life comes through effort. And so a great deal of what we deal with is the fact that when someone provokes you, you have these two little men, one on each shoulder. Most of you can identify with that. One we'll call Elmo, the emotions, and the other is Isaiah, the intelligent. And when somebody provokes you, you got one of these on each shoulder. Can you identify with that? And let's see what Elmo says to you. Elmo will say the kind of things we're talking about. You got a right to do whatever you want, whenever you want to. Go for the thrill and excitement. You ought to do what you feel like doing. Now, one of the things you got to remember is that Elmo will lie to you. I say to my clients, you got to be careful when you listen to Elmo, because Elmo will lie to you. Elmo said to you before you did your crime, go ahead and hit him. You don't care what happens to you. So Elmo was lying to you. When you stood before the judge and he asked you to explain yourself, you didn't say, Your Honor, just go ahead and give me what you want to. I don't care what happens to me. You see, Elmo was lying to you, and you got stupid and believed him. Elmo lies to everybody. Does Elmo lie to you? That's not the problem. The problem is when you start believing him. Now, there's about a half a dozen dirty words that our clients use, and they're kind of like this: shoulda, woulda, coulda, oughta, always, and never. You try to stay as far away from those dirty words with your clients as you can. I've never worked in a prison where I cannot sit around and hear the inmates talking about what we should have done was, what we could have done was, what we ought to have done was. They always throw the book at me, and they never give me a chance. That sound like the conversations you hear as you go through? And you see some of the others that were up there. Well, what does Elmo talk to you about? Elmo will talk to you about your responsibility. What is my responsibility? He talks to you about taking life one step at a time, not overreacting. Talks to you about appropriate consideration of others. Talks to you about goals and objectives, and recognizes that there's no guarantee when you do what you're supposed to that you're going to work out every day the way it should work out. Matter of fact, shoulda is often used, too often. Sometimes I throw that credit card down and I say, you need not to should all over yourself. If everybody did what they should do, I should be able to leave this and pick it up Friday. Is that right? Mm-hmm. In this class, you might advise me to leave it. But in the classes I teach, most of the time, you wouldn't advise me to leave it. They sometimes dare me to leave it. And then I say to them, listen, won't most of you do what you should do? And most of the time, they at least suggest they would. And I say, how many would it take for me to be messed up? And they say, just one. And I say this: when you break the law and put yourself in a position for other people to take power over your life, everybody will not treat you the way they should. Okay? Now, if I don't want people to get that credit card, what do I need to do? I need to keep it in my pocket and take care of my responsibility. And what you have to do is live in such a way that you don't give people that kind of power over your life. Because when you do, everybody will not treat you like they should. Instead of arguing about your rights, let's talk about your responsibility. If we can focus on your responsibility instead of your rights, now we're talking about what it is you can do so that your life will get better. Responsible living is sometimes painful, often boring and mundane in the short term. But in the end, it brings meaning, fulfillment, and purpose. Now, Elmo's lifestyle is just the opposite. You're chasing the thrill and you end up in frustration. The responsible life, you go over this way and you find that it ends in meaning and fulfillment. But on the irresponsible side, all of the things that Elmo doesn't tell you when he hops on your shoulder are there. That is, when Elmo hops on your shoulder, he doesn't talk to you about chaos and courts and confusion and incarceration or fights or fines. But if you follow the kind of thinking that Elmo offers, what comes uninvited is all of these things. And your life becomes a little bit like the little dog chasing its tail. It's going round and round at a very rapid rate of speed to where? Oh, no, hello. Is that descriptive of the lifestyle of many of your clients? Many of the clients will come in and I'll say, what'd you do to get here? Well, brother, I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. I said, I suppose you were. They don't send too many people to my class for being at the right place at the right time doing the right thing. So I suppose that you were at the wrong place at the wrong time, but you left out a significant element. You were also doing A, the wrong thing, and B, it was a lifestyle for you, not just an incident. I mean by that, if they hadn't got you last night, they could have got you night before last. If they hadn't got you night before last, they could have got you 2 weeks earlier. If not for the same crime, for some crime. Because your lifestyle was a lifestyle of solving problems without proper regard for others. And they almost always have to admit that it was a lifestyle, not just an incident. If they can reduce it to an incident, then they don't have to deal with a lifestyle. It's our responsibility to expand it to the lifestyle so that they can see that it was a way of thinking. For example, name me a crime. Timothy? Breaking and entering. Can I break and enter if I have appropriate regard for others? Name me another. Stealing. Can I steal from a person if I have appropriate regard for them? Give me another. Can I rob a person if I have appropriate regard for them? You see, it's a lifestyle of solving problems without appropriate regard for others. And you see in the middle of crime, I think it's interesting, what is in the middle of crime? What's the letter in the middle? What's in the middle of pride? What's in the middle of sin? And that is the kind of thinking and the kind of lifestyle that got them there. Now, the question is not as much where your life is, but where is it going? You see, if you don't interrupt this thinking pattern while they're there and they leave thinking the same way, as soon as their behavior reverts, as soon as they're out, back to the thinking patterns that has been going on, and eventually they're incarcerated again. Now, this lifestyle becomes empty, this one becomes filled. They swap places at the end of the day and over the long haul. Now, you ask sometimes, does it work? Let me share with you something that one of my clients gave me long ago. She had entered into the class, and near the conclusion, she shared this with the class. I know God knew I needed help. I knew things had to change. I couldn't do it on my own, so this was all arranged. Sobriety has given me the chance to see things clear, to think a lot and change my ways, to deal up front with fear. This class has helped me understand a lot about myself. It's taught me how to deal with life, not set it on the shelf. You told me how my evil thoughts could tear my life apart, and taught me how to find these thoughts or to rid these thoughts before they even start. You showed me how to make my life much easier to bear, and I would like to thank you for the knowledge that you shared. I like my life of soberness. I want it to stay that way. I'll do what I need and pray to God and take it day by day. She said I could share this with you. Her name was Judy McCutcheon. So, when they take it one step at a time, they're able then to move in that direction. Real important for us to recognize that there are certain beliefs that our clients tend to have, and certain beliefs that they have that are somewhat different than the traditional beliefs that you and I hold. That is, kindness to them often means weakness. And so certain words that they use don't mean the same thing to them that they mean to us. Kind of reminds me of a story of a lady that wrote one time. She was going camping for the first time. And she wrote to the camp director because she was extremely concerned whether they would have toilet facilities. And as she wrote and said, I wonder if you have at the campground a bathroom commode. But she felt she was being a little too forward, so she changed it and said, does the campground have its own BC? Well, the camp director got this letter, and he just couldn't figure out what this BC meant. And so he began to talk with the other campers and decided that she must have meant, does it have its own Baptist church? So he sat down and wrote the following reply. I'm pleased to announce to you that our campground does have its own BC. It's located just 9 miles north of our camp, is open on Sunday and Wednesday only. Sometimes it's so crowded, there are 5 to a seat. It only seats 500 people. But you'll be pleased to know that many of our campers make a day of it. They take their lunch with them and arrive early and stay late. They're having a supper next Sunday to raise more money for BCs, to have more seats at the BC. They're going to have the supper in the basement of the BC. You'd be pleased to know that my husband met his wife at the BC. I don't go as regularly as I should, but as we grow older, it seems much more of an effort to go, especially during the cold weather. But if you come to our campground, perhaps I could go with you the first time and introduce you to all the people at the BC. You'll be pleased to know that we'll get you a seat up front so you can be seen by everyone. Well, that goes to say that some of the beliefs that they have don't mean the same thing to them that they mean to us. And let's see if we can roll those pretty. My own way of living is the best. There are no social boundaries for me. I decide what is right. I take what is mine. That is, the world kind of ripped me off to start with, so whatever I can take and possess, that's mine. One young man said to me, sure, I don't do anything, and my mother does a lot for me, but I didn't ask to be born. And I asked the class, did you? Well, life ain't fair. Get over it. I take what's mine, not yours. Life is a one-way street, my way. I do what I want when I want it. Lying is easy. Now, if I tell you a lie, and you're stupid enough that you don't check it out, that ain't my problem. You're the dumbo that didn't check it out. That's your problem. It's okay to take advantage of, you guys think you're psyching us out. I want you to know that we're psyching you out. We know which chaplains are tender. We know which ones are very sensitive, and we will give them the greatest sob story you ever seen. We also know which ones are tough, And we're going to try to get them out of control so that they violate somebody or they say something they shouldn't say. Then we want to report them for abuse. You guys think you're psyching us out? No. We're psyching your stuff out. Thinking or wishing makes it so. If somebody took something of mine, I'm not going to go report it. Wimps and female cats do that. I'm going to figure out who got it, and I'm going upside his head. That's my right. My responsibility is to please me. And kindness is weakness. If you're kind to me, I don't mind stealing from you. You'll be too kind to turn me in. You only go around once. Get all the gusto you can. Sentimentality and power are good. That is, if water power will get your sympathy, I'll use that. But if I can get my way with you by being angry and get you to do something you don't supposed to do, I'll use that. Whatever emotion will get me what I want, when I want it, that's what I'll use. They do the South that way, they'll attempt to do you that way. And you need to understand in this whole thing that there are two goals that are common to everybody. We all have a tendency to go our own way. That's what that lifestyle of thinking is all about, is it not? And we all have a desire to avoid immediate pain. Almost all of these things are pushed in that direction because of those two basic goals. Often we get them to go back and see where they are on that continuum. And the question that we constantly go back to is to get them to evaluate what we did and go back to that continuum. Where are you and where are you moving? Let's move then to the basic needs. We talk about 4 basic needs which drives a lot of our behavior. We all have a need to live. We have a need to learn. We have a need to love, to give and receive love effectively, and to be somebody. As a matter of fact, those 4 goals are kind of basic to your being here, are they not? Which one of those needs were you trying to meet by coming here? To learn. Anybody here for any other reason? Come on now. You're here because you love your clients?
Be significant.
To be more effective and more significant in what you're doing? Okay.
We're getting paid, yeah.
Some of you get paid. Not very much, but you're getting paid. You make a better living. All of those are, now, there's kind of good news and bad news in that. We'll get in that a little later. What I want to share with you is that a lot of the times the clients that we have were doing what they were doing in order to meet one or more of those needs. I shared this in a group. I had the unusual opportunity in Wabash Valley to be working with a group of prisoners combined with a group of staff, all in the same group, and applying and working with the same thinking areas. And I want you to see how they responded when we first hit this point. And I said to Ralphie, Ralphie, why'd you go upside his head with that tent pole? Oh, he said, I had to. He dissed me. Now, what does he mean, he dissed me? He considered me to be insignificant. I let him know if I hit him with that tent pole, he's messing with somebody. Then I had another guy got a DWS, driving while suspended. Now, of course, he got a DWI first, then got a DWS. And I said, why in the world would you get a DWS? Oh, he said, Doc, listen, everybody got to make a living. And I was just driving to work. Now, 90% of the time when they say that, they're lying, but the other 10%, they were really going to work. They were really wanting to meet a legitimate need. But they were taking an irresponsible path to meet that need. Now that he has a DWI, he has to either get a provisional license, get transportation of somebody else, get public transportation, or in some cases even find another job. It's not that the need changes, it's the way to meet that need in a legitimate fashion has changed. And almost all of the behavior that we engaged in was an attempt to meet one or more of these situations. You hear the old country western, not going to sing it for you, 10 foot tall and bulletproof. And what that alcoholic is saying is, when I'm drinking, I'm somebody. I'm Mr. Big. And some of us did a lot of stuff out there on the street in order to prove our significance. I think I shared with you yesterday that when I was playing football, I thought I was somebody in a little town playing football. After football was over in high school, I was again a nobody. So the way you be somebody is you check out all the beer joints and you begin to build your rep. I remember walking into a joint one night and the fellow saying, "Who's the meanest SOB around Kateechea and Norris and Central?" And the bartender said, well, I guess that guy right over there points me out. I wore that like a badge. Man, I had arrived. I was somebody. Somebody's going to get killed. When I run into somebody that's a little meaner than I was going to get killed, but I wore that like a badge for what I thought I had arrived. But I was somebody now. Now, after a while, I got a hold of somebody that was. And my mama didn't ask me who got hold of me. She said, "Son, how in the world did you get loose?" I found out I wasn't who I thought I was. I also remember going to a tavern not long after I quit drinking. And I thought, those guys are so stupid. They think they're such hot stuff. They think they're somebody. And I said to the guy that went with me, I said, "I never was like that, was I?" He said, "No, you were worse." And so sometimes we do these things, try to prove that we're somebody. And I asked you guys yesterday, I believe, to get in touch with how you did some things in order to meet one of these needs, how that affected your being out there. And I think a couple of you, Maurice, I believe you were going to share with us, suggested that kind of rang your bell too, be somebody when you're out there.
Yes, I can identify with that. Me being Mr. Basketball in 1993, you know, and I was the center of attention, you know, all the attention was on me, and, you know, I was in the limelight, and I liked it that. So when I got out of high school, you know, I still wanted to be in that limelight. And, you know, I just chose the wrong path to go down, you know, to hold on to that limelight that I was getting, that attention that I was getting. But I had to have it, you know, because I felt like, you know, they knew me when I was doing this. I still want them to know me, you know, as the center of attention, as the top dog. Mm-hmm. So I chose the drug gang, you know, and the end results was.
And sooner or later, we have to come to grips with the fact we're somebody because God don't make no junk.
Yes, sir. And I realized that.
Yeah. And then Jeff, I believe you had something.
On mine, I think you know, I was a drug dealer, and I was a person who dealt with any kind of illicit materials that were hard to come by. You know, I felt good when somebody could come to me, and ask me to find something. And the harder the item was to find, the harder I had to go out of my way to get it. The better I felt, the more I felt I was helping them out. And that made me
You were somebody.
feel significant. Yeah, I was somebody. People knew me on the streets. That's the go-to guy. If you need something, he can get it for you.
Mm-hmm. He can get it even if you can't afford it. You can afford it from Jeff, Mr. Somebody. And so that gave you a lot of significance. But when the world began to fall around you, those guys also identified you as the go-to guy, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
when one of them Me Too buddies is going to jail, unless he can identify his supplier, you found out you were real significant.
Yeah.
Huh?
Everybody wanted to know.
You see how they identify with the fact they were doing what they were doing to be significant? And you see, as a minister, you can share with them a basis for being somebody, that God don't make no junk. And many times they will admit they were doing certain things just to be somebody. I had one boy that was fighting with the other, and he said I had to hit him. He dissed me. he considered me a nobody, so I had to let him know he's messing with somebody. Or I got a DWS. Why did you get a DWS? Well, I was going to work. I already had a DWI. It wasn't that he wasn't trying to meet a legitimate need. He still had a need to live. But he had to find a responsible way to meet that need. And so a lot of what we do is with that idea of meeting those four basic needs. We'll tie those in as we continue through the course. There's kind of good news and bad news, as I've shared with you. The good news, you heard about the good news, bad news. Good news was the guy got a free trip in the airplane. Bad news was he fell out. Good news was there was a haystack underneath the airplane. The bad news was there was a pitchfork in the haystack. Good news was he missed the pitchfork. Bad news was he missed the haystack. My wife has a more succinct way of saying that. She said, "You want the good news or bad news?" I said, "Give me the good news, babe." She said, "The airbags work." You got the rest. Of course, I teach some domestic batterers too, and I know I'm in trouble in class when I approach this subject and the guy says the good news is my wife's sick and the bad news is she's going to live. I know that we've got a bunch of work to do. But there's good news and bad news, and the good news is that all of the positive, constructive behaviors we've demonstrated is an attempt to meet one or more of those needs. The bad news is that most of the time the behavior that they were engaging in that was destructive was in order to meet a need. We have to help them find a legitimate way to meet that need. And that's kind of basic to the thinking pattern that we will survey. Now, if we understand the four tools of discipline, I think it helps us to understand a great deal about our client. And I'm going to highlight them, hit them in a hurry. Number one, Peck, Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled kind of delineates this, and I think it relates to a lot that we do with our clients. He suggests that life is painful and sometimes difficult, often challenging. That if we accept the fact that life is challenging and difficult, that life gets less difficult because we then develop the skills to deal with it. On the other hand, if we ignore that or deny that, don't accept that, we rebel against it and life gets more and more difficult. And I think that kind of gives us an overview of the clientele that we have. Let me give you two kids and we'll illustrate the first principle of a willingness to delay gratification, which is important in life but has not been important in the life of the clients that we deal with, usually. We'll say that you have two kids. One of them we'll call Beavis and the other we'll call Carrie. Beavis' attitude towards life is play now and play later. Carrie's attitude toward life is to accept the fact that school may be a challenge, but in spite of the fact that school is a challenge and sometimes it's difficult, that if she will delay her gratification, she can get through school. Both of them go to school. The teacher gives them an assignment. He says, "I want you to sit here and take notes in your class, and at recess you can visit." Now, Carrie has accepted the fact that school may be a challenge. What does she do? Takes notes. What does Beavis do? He doesn't delay his gratification. He begins to talk to his partner. And when they get off the school bus, the same thing applies. Carrie takes a few minutes, delays her gratification, gets her homework. What does Beavis do? Remember, his idea in life is play now and play later. Beavis throws it in the round to it file. Goes out and plays. Mama calls him for supper, says, "Son, why don't you get your homework?" He said to get around to it later. Mama, got to watch television right now. And so he watches till night, starts to bed. She says, "Why don't you do your homework? Call me a little early in the morning." But when she calls Beavis in the morning, he's doing them Z's. He don't want to delay his gratification and go get his homework on the bus. You ever get your homework on the bus? Now, for whom does school become more difficult? After a while, Beavis decides that it's boring, right? And it's so boring, he sees John over there that didn't finish school, and he's got a new red truck, so I'm just going to drop out of school because it's boring, right? Remember, most kids reject school long before school rejects them. Now, having rejected school, he gets him a job. What kind of job does he now get? Flipping hamburgers. Is that boring? Is that monotonous? But Beavis doesn't want to delay his gratification, So he says, screw this job. I'm going to get me a job in construction. It pays a little more anyway, right? What kind of construction work does Beavis get to do now? It's what we used to call the gopher job. Go for this and go for that and go for anything the skilled worker wants. And so Beavis said, heck with this stuff. Besides, he don't want to delay his gratification. I know where I can make me some quick and easy money. I don't even have to pay taxes on it. Hello. And that'll be a lot more exciting and thrilling, right? And it is until he gets caught. And when he gets caught, does life get boring? You don't have anybody call you from a penitentiary and say, I want to get out of here, I'm working too hard, do you? They want to get out because it's boring. You see, the fact that he didn't accept the fact that life was difficult and challenging and live with the principle of quick and easy, he didn't get around it, because every time you take an illegitimate shortcut to difficulty, life gets more difficult. And almost all of our clients are in the situation that they're in because they always attempt to take an illegitimate shortcut to difficulty. Is that characteristic of the thinking of the clients with which you deal? And every time you take an illegitimate shortcut, life begins to get more difficult. Now, I want you to understand what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I'm not suggesting you have to have a great education in order to be successful in life. Some of us had to get it in order to just survive. But you don't necessarily have to have it. What I am suggesting is that your client has to come to grips with the tool of delaying his gratification. And if he does, life begins to get more meaningful. If he comes to grips with it at McDonald's, he's there on time, he's there every day. He delays his gratification, gets his paycheck, and he may get a promotion and life will get less difficult. If he does it on construction, the same thing is true, and the other workers take interest in him, and he soon learns the skill. So I'm not suggesting that you have to have what I am suggesting is that you have to accept the fact that life is difficult and challenging, and if you begin to develop the tools to cope with it and delay your gratification, life gets less threatening to you. The second tool is a client must accept appropriate responsibility. That is, there are basically two kinds of people in life. One is the person that's kind of neurotic and they take too much responsibility. They're worrywarts and they're capable of, without help, of sometimes becoming codependent. They take on too much. Anything goes wrong, they worry about what's wrong. You ever live around anybody like that? Ever been like that? Now, they accept too much responsibility. Now I'm going to take a guess that most of you fall out on that side of things. You know why? I would suspect that because you're here. You didn't have to be here. You took on additional work. Some of you took on what you're doing in addition to your job. So you have a tendency to fall out on that side. But I'll also bet you that your client falls out on the other side. He's not in jail because he took too much responsibility. Haven't seen too many rap sheets that said we're taking this boy to jail because he assumed too much responsibility, right? Now, the problem, at least as I see it, often in the world, is that the counseling world has been geared primarily to the neurotic, the professional counselors. You know why? The neurotics worried. They would call a counselor. They would go to the counselor. They would pay for their counseling. Okay? Now, in that, if a person is neurotic and they're putting too much pressure on themselves in an atmosphere of unconditional positive regard, it's often that with a little direction and taking pressure off themselves, they get better. Does that make sense? But the clientele with which we work are not that clientele. My clients don't have problems. Their probation officer has a problem. Their warden has a problem. Their mother has a problem. Everybody who works with them have a problem, but they don't have a problem. Is that the same client? And they're not there because they took too much responsibility or worried too much. They're there because they didn't take enough responsibility. And they will not get better by giving them unconditional positive regard. They're not there because they put too much responsibility on themselves. They're there because they put too little. And so our responsibility with this client is to comfort the afflicted. They've afflicted themselves too much. But our responsibility over here is to afflict the comfortable. They're too comfortable not taking responsibility. We've got to put some pressure on them to take responsibility. They get better when they're held accountable, when they're asked to measure up. They will do what you inspect, not what you expect, and only part of what you inspect. And they get better when they're held accountable. If you send them to one of these traditional counselors, they'll end up like the young lady that Jay Adams talks about that said, I went to my psychiatrist to be psychoanalyzed to find out why I killed the cat and blacked my husband's eyes. He laid me on the downy couch to see what he could find, and here's what he dredged up from my subconscious mind. When I was 1, my mommy hid my dolly in a trunk, and so it follows naturally that I am always drunk. When I was 2, I felt ambivalent toward my brothers, and so it follows naturally I poison all my lovers. When I was 3, I saw my father kiss the maid one day, and so it follows naturally I suffer from kleptomania. But I'm happy that I've learned the lesson life is taught, that everything I do that's wrong is someone else's fault. And we'll deal with that a little more when we get into victim stance, but that's precisely where our client is, and society has encouraged that. And when society encourages that, they don't get better, they get worse. Okay. Revise the roadmap according to truth. Now, I often put it this way. You see, our job as a counselor is to tell the client the truth about life on life's terms. Not the way it should be, the way it is. Sometimes I ask my client what he wants to get out of life. I had one young man told me that he wanted to get to jail at an earlier age than any of his cousins. My job is to tell him the truth about life on life's terms. And so I said to him, you see, I can't take that away from him. That's his desire. I said, have you decided whose girlfriend you want to be when you get there? Oh, no, what you talking about? And I explained to him what I was talking about. He decided he wanted something better out of life. You see, it's our job to tell them the truth about life on life's terms. Now, there are 2 principles, or 2 sayings that I think kind of fit where we're at in working with that client and revising the roadmap according to truth. One is that we've got to be that 6-foot mirror that reveals the truth to them about life on life's terms. There are 2 principles that I think you bring to bear on that particular tool of discipline. One of them is this. It's the story of Mr. Sunshine and Mr. Wing. You heard the story how they were arguing. And Mr. Wing said, I'll get that coat off the man, and Sunshine let him try. And the more he blew, the tighter the guy buttoned the coat up. And after a while, he gives up. And Mr. Sunshine said, I'll get it off, and he just smiles at him. That's our job, to give them the truth in an atmosphere of warmth and Christian concern. Okay? The other principle involved there is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. However, you can feed him salted nuts. Our job is to allow the consequences to be salted nuts. And if it gets salty enough, he has the opportunity to change. You see, we can't make anybody change. But if the consequence is salty enough, he or she may decide to change. We are the most amenable to change when it's not working for us. And that's the exciting thing. The exciting thing about my class is that nobody wants to be there. They're the most amenable to change at that point. Now, number 4 is you got to balance that. Sometimes you got to be tough, and sometimes you got to give some room.
One of the things as youth workers, we talked about, I'm going to take you back to the second one, accepting appropriate responsibility. Who here works with youth? Anybody up to, I would say, age 25 qualifies as working with youth? 2, 3? We got several. Okay, great. This is going to apply to a lot of you. Now, we tend to focus on juveniles being up to 18, but as I said, it can be 22 or even 25. And in Indiana, they're currently working in the Department of Corrections with youthful offender programs geared all the way up into those age categories, realizing that the approach that you're taking with younger offenders is going to necessarily differ from the older offenders. All kind of reasons for that we don't have really time to go into. But we need to focus here for just a minute and identify who we're talking about. There are two types of kids. There's the kid in trouble and there's the troubled kid. Many of us who have gotten into working with kids were once kids in trouble ourselves. And some characteristics of a kid in trouble is that we grew up in a home that had some external boundaries. That is to say, our parents gave us set guidelines. We knew what the rules were. Now, we may have rebelled and chose to break them, and we didn't like them, and if you were like me, you might have butted against them every opportunity you had, but there were rules, and they were usually enforced consistently. We call that external boundaries or external controls. Another characteristic is, as a result of having those external controls applied and growing up in at least an atmosphere of some love and concern and positive regard, there has some internal controls. For example, when I was a rebel, in the height of my rebellion, when I would have nothing to do with church or God or even worse, Christians, there were some things I wouldn't do because I knew some of those things were going to destroy me. And I was so bent on the idea of I can go my own way and I can make it work for me that I was going to prove I could do it, and I could do it without God and Christianity and the church. I had those internal controls saying, no, there's some things, even though I want nothing to do with God, there's some things I won't do. Many of your clients are the same way. They have some internal controls. Another characteristic of a kid in trouble is they act out to meet a need. Usually it's a need for significance. And as you work with those kids, you're nodding your heads, you can see that those kids in trouble, they want to be significant. They want to be somebody. Now contrast this to a troubled kid. A troubled kid on the outside looks just like a kid in trouble. You can't differentiate between the two by looking at them. You've got to dig deeper, and the first way that we can differentiate between the two is there are little or no internal controls. Kids I worked with in the group home typically had mother or had no father involved. Mother was usually in jail, in prison, or had a drug problem. The home they grew up in did not have rules, and what rules they had were enforced inconsistently, totally inconsistently. They may break a rule for staying out too late, so they get beaten up, cussed at, abused, and then they go out and they party all weekend. Mom says, yeah, go head out. Or they'll say, you're grounded, and grounding lasts a day or two, and mom wants to go get drunk, so mom says, well, I'll let you off grounding. There are no external rules in the home they grew up in. Also, and you can understand why, there's no internal controls. They lack consistent internal controls. It's a better way to put it. They may at some time say, you know what, I'm not going to mess with that. I may like my weed, but I don't mess with the hard stuff. And they can do that sometimes, but they struggle with consistency. And finally, the contrast there is acting out as a lifestyle. This is something they do all the time. They don't know any different. And if you confront them with how to meet their needs and you say, you know, there's a better way to meet their needs, they'll look at you like they're crazy, like you're crazy. What are you talking about? This is how everybody does it. Prime example of that is the need to be significant. I tell the kids all the time I'm working with, finish the sentence for me. If somebody disses you, how do you think they finish the sentence? You got to diss them back. You betcha. I have a right to what? I have a right to disrespect them back. I have a right to revenge. I have a right to anything I want to if somebody disrespects me. It's a lifestyle. And you try to convince them otherwise. It's an uphill battle because it has been that way from day one. How do they respond? This is very important because how kids in trouble respond to you as a staff, sorry this isn't in your notes, we're throwing this in for free. Those of you that are looking. How do they respond when you let them get away with a minor mess up? A kid slipping, you see they're trying really hard, you appreciate their effort, and they screwed up. How do they respond when you say, okay, I'm going to cut you a break this time? Well, a kid in trouble is going to see you as cutting her a break. Okay, thanks. You're right. I appreciate this because I really don't want to go back a level. I really don't want to lose a month, whatever. A troubled kid sees you as a sucker. Thanks, fool. And I'll get away with it tomorrow with a different staff when you're off. Oh, and by the way, you think you had something on me? You didn't have nothing on me, softy. You had to give me that break, because if you didn't, I was going to tell on you. I got garbage on you, and you know it. That's why they let me get away with that. In a similar way, what happens to a kid when you discipline them? Well, a troubled kid responds, they may rebel, but they know you mean business. Again, get back to external controls, the home they grew up in. They know you mean business. Their parents mean business. Their frame of reference is a home with consistent internal controls. A troubled kid, contrast that to a home with no consistent external controls. How's a person from that background going to react? They're going to cut off the relationship. I'll show you. You're going to discipline me. You don't love me anymore. You don't care about me. You talk about God, but really you just like getting people in trouble. Anybody hear anything like that before? Yeah. I'm glad I'm not the only one. Last one, how about when you seek to correct an injustice? And here what I'm talking about is maybe when a staff didn't react properly. We all work with other staff who are human. Well, what happens when a staff messes up? When they're too hard on a kid, or when the kid was really innocent and they pinned something on them. Staff have bad days too. What happens when you go and straighten that out? Well, a troubled kid, a kid in trouble, is going to think you're the cure-all for their problems. Even they are going to say that, and they're going to develop that relationship with you that becomes unhealthy and says, when I get in trouble, I just go to this person. This person loves me, and love means they're going to bail me out. This is particularly true of kids who come from affluent homes, better off backgrounds. Their parents have always showed love by giving them things, and now they respond, or they expect you to respond with love by giving them what they need. A troubled kid, it reinforces their belief that you are the go-to person in every situation, and that she is the victim in every situation. He or she is always the victim. It's the number 2 thinking area we're going to talk about in a minute. And you just reinforce that because now you went to bat for them. And so what I would encourage you to do in this last situation when you're working with kids and you see a perceived injustice or a real injustice where a staff overreacted or was just flat out wrong, is whatever you feel the need to do totally behind closed doors. And when the offender comes to you and says, Chaplain, I got to talk to you, I got a real problem with this staff, is to put it all back on them. All of it. What did you do wrong? I even said to a kid one time, you know what? I'm willing to admit that the other staff in this situation was 99% of the problem. But until you added 1%, you didn't get shipped. And he got shipped to a different facility, a tighter facility with more rules and regulation. He was upset, and I said, until you gave your 1%, you didn't get shipped. So we always focus on the things they can control. You can't control that other staff, and if everything's out of your control, you're going to be miserable. Sorry, I can't help you. I can't change those things either. Well, we're going to look very quickly at some of the things that make up our life. All of us have beliefs, thoughts, feelings, action, behavior. And if you've studied any anthropology, you understand that different people have different models for how people function. What is it that makes you do what you do? Is it your beliefs? Is it your thinking? What combination? What grows out of what? So we're going to share with you our anthropological model. Fancy word there. The first piece is the beliefs. Second piece is our thoughts. Thoughts will influence emotions. And emotions influence behavior, and behavior give us results. What we're telling you, if you can understand this one piece, you'll understand where we're coming from. The church has historically concentrated on beliefs, and we as chaplains want to get to their beliefs. Very important. But what we have to help them understand is, until it shows in your results, your beliefs really haven't changed. What we always want to do, you tell them you need to change, They want to change right here. They want to change behavior. Oh, I can do that. I can stand on my head for 30 days. I can stand on my head and gurgle peanut butter to get out of here. What do you want me to do? I'll do it. Okay? But under pressure, you act out what you really believe.
All right.
Okay? So when we see you under pressure, that's when we know whether or not your beliefs have changed. One last piece of this is our results come around and reinforce or refine our beliefs. Whenever we get the results we don't like, they will come, like them or not like them, they come around and we either change our beliefs, modify them to accommodate the new input, or the second part is we just add on to them. Okay? It just says, you're right. I'm right. I can't trust anybody. And inevitably, when I talk about beliefs you have, and I'll have them list them, one belief that always comes up, can't trust anybody. I say, you know what? I'm going to prove to you that I'm clairvoyant. I can read your mind. And the kids are all going, yeah, this white boy's crazier than he looks. And I said, okay, check it out. I said, at one point in time in your life, you thought you could trust somebody. You may have to go back to when you were 3, but you thought you could trust somebody. And you trust them, and your thinking was, you know, if I can trust this person, I'm going to tell them a secret. Your emotions were closeness, an emotional bond with that person. Your behavior, you told them something you didn't want anybody else to know. What happened? You got burned. And I said, and at first you refined that belief and you said, you know what? I can trust some people, but it's got to be closer to me. I've got to watch more closely. You refined that belief. And then we went right around and we go all through the same thing again. And what happened again? They got burned. So what did they do? They refined it. And refined it, and the circle got smaller and smaller, and now at 15 or 16 or wherever they are when I get them, I say, you don't trust anybody. And rightfully so, and this model fits. And the same thing, they'll say, you know, I've been trying to do good. I've been trying to really do what I need to do to get out of here. But then somebody says something or does something to me, and I just go off. I can't help it. I say, you know what? You haven't changed what you really, truly believe. And when you're willing to attack that part of the problem, then we're going to get somewhere. I worked with a girl. I'm working with a girl currently last week. I laid this out for her. Been working with her for a couple of weeks. I said, here we go. This is the essence of what we're going to do together. And I laid this whole thing out for her. I'm telling you is the results you got. You're on probation, constant fights with your mom. You're actually not you're probation and house arrest. Constant problems with your family. You're doing miserable in school. Do you like the life you got? No. I said, then you need to attack these beliefs. And if I can show you that some of your beliefs are not working for you, willing to change, what'd she say? She said no. No. She said no. I said, that's okay, because you know what? I'm teaching you this one-on-one as a favor to your mom. But I teach these in Wood Youth Center, and maybe you'll listen to me there. Her mom called me 2 days ago and said the cops are picking her up to take her to Wood tomorrow night. And when I visit her next week in the county lockup, I'm going to say, you know what? You don't have to listen to me now, because I teach these in Department of Corrections too. We have to get the offenders to understand, if you don't like your results, you can change your behavior if you want to. That's great, but it's going to last a little while. And under pressure, you're going to act out what you really believe. Okay? And it's like a train. You see all those arrows? It's like a train. And what happens when we try to change just the results or the behavior? What part of the train would that be? Huh? Rear. They don't have it anymore. It used to be the caboose, right? You try to stop a caboose on a train. Good luck. All right? You want to stop that train, what you going to change? I'm going for the engine. That's right, baby, the engine. And so if we're going to stop this train and you want different results, we got to attack the beliefs. Okay?
What we're going to do now is to go through what we refer to as basic thinking errors. They are what we refer to as gateway thinking errors. And the idea of a gateway thinking error is it's very much like a gateway drug. Alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana are considered gateway drugs. Doesn't mean that everybody that uses one of those goes, in fact, on to harder stuff. But almost everybody that's done cocaine or heroin started through the gate. And so we will spend more time on the gateway thinking errors because they're the gates. And almost always, people enter in through the gateway of closed thinking, victim stance, or viewing self as a good person. Let me define it this way. Closed thinking is more or less an attitude. That is, that I'm great at pointing out the faults of others. There's little self-disclosure, and there's poor self-evaluation or examination. And it's reflected, that attitude is reflected in statements you hear from the clients. For example, I say to our clients many of the time, when you were in lockup, did you hear somebody in lockup that was walking around down lockup saying, "Nobody gonna tell me what to do? I don't know who they think they're talking to." And I said, if the trustee came and said to them, the sheriff says y'all got to do so and so, I don't know who they think they're talking to. Nobody gonna tell me what to do. Now, if that's characteristic of criminal thinking, then that should, in fact, be the kind of statements you're hearing when you're in lockup. Any of you ever hear those kind of statements? I didn't think so. That's like asking in the penitentiary, have any of you ever been in lockup? So, I asked them, I said, did you hear anybody walking around saying those kind of things? He said, yeah. I said, do you understand that the person that was saying that is either a liar or a lunatic or some combination? Well, I didn't see nobody messing with them. Oh, no. I said, well, let me ask you something. Of all the places that they could have eaten, is it not true that even the Golden Arches is a better place to eat than where they were going to eat? They were going to eat green eggs and it's not even Easter. Of all the clothing stores in town, is not even J.C. Penney, the French tailor, got better clothes than what they're going to wear. They're going to wear a bright orange jumpsuit and they ain't going nowhere to jump. Of all the motels in that town, is it not true that even the one that leaves its light on for you is better than the place where they're going to spend the night? And now I want to know, was nobody telling them what to do, or was somebody telling them what they could eat, what they could wear, where they could sleep? If you take an attitude that there ain't nobody going to tell you what to do, you will put yourself in a position where somebody will tell you almost everything you have to do. The tighter you hold that position, the more people tell you what you can do. The only people who don't get told what to do are those that do what they need to do without being told. And if you don't believe that, decide ain't nobody going to tell you can pay taxes this year. And you'll find out somebody will tell you what you can do. So, unless you interrupt that kind of thinking, your life becomes a revolving door. And I use Dickie Tater. I love the Tater family. You know, there's Angie Tater and Dickie Tater and all of the Taters. Well, Dickie Tater is an attitude of closed thinking. Nobody's going to tell him what to do. And he walks around like that until the warden comes and says you can get out in 30 days on good behavior. What does he start doing then? He starts doing everything they tell him to do, so much so that the other inmates get on him. And when they get on him, he has an answer for them. You know what his answer is? I can stand on my head for 6 months. I tell them what they want to hear. Now, in that answer is a key to what you've got to deal with. What he's saying is my thinking has not changed, my behavior has. I tell them what they want to hear. And what I say to them is this: if nothing changes, then nothing changes. We always deal with profound statements. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. There's two problems, or two parts of the formula. One is the system. The other is your thinking. The way you've been thinking has gotten you in the system. Do you think the system's going to change? Well, they'll agree with you that it's not. So if the way you've been thinking has been getting you in the system and you don't change the way you're thinking, guess what's going to be? Now, Once he says that, he goes out. He comes up and gets a parole sign. Dickie signs that parole. Tells him to follow certain rules, but nobody's going to tell him what to do, right? He tells them what they want to hear, so he signs it. He gets out, he gets a job. Applies for a job. Well, I say to my class, would you like to hire him? You can't tell him what to do. They don't even want him pushing drugs for him. So, well, how does he get a job? He tells them what they want to hear. Yeah, I can do that job. I've done tougher jobs than that. They say, it's a pretty tough job. Well, the tougher they got, the further away they lived. And I lived in a tent past the last house. Just give me the job. And the first day he does everything they tell him. The next day they tell him to do something he don't feel like doing. What does he tell them then? He tells them, take this job and shove it. May even tell them what part of the anatomy to shove it. Walks out of the place, goes down the street. There's a reserved parking place, and he said, I'm a grown man. It's reserved for me. He goes into the tavern. Now, he signed an agreement that he wouldn't go in the tavern, but he's grown and 21. Ain't nobody going to tell him what to do, right? And he drinks 3 or 4 in that tavern, and the bartender says to him, son, you need to go on home. Well, what does a closed thinker say to that? He's great at pointing out that old guy over there. He doesn't drink 3 since I drank 1. And so the bartender lets his fingers do the walking. 9, 1, 1. And in comes the officer, and if the officer is not a close thinker, I don't think you've ever met an officer that's a close thinker. I'm going to throw that in. If the officer is not a close thinker, he says to him, son, you need to go on home. But what does a close thinker say to that? Well, they're just picking on me. That guy over there drank more than I did, and they're just picking on me because I'm on home detention. And there's going to be some slow riding and some sad music, right? And Dickie Tater's going to be in that revolving door, walking around. I don't know who they think they're talking to. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. Because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Now remember, what we said is that you have to challenge the way they think. He's telling about his own close thinking first. Want to tell us about what you identified as close thinking and where you're coming from on that? Or you may even want to continue the debate. I know you will.
I got arrested on DUI, and I thought, well, that's not going to stop me from driving. Even though I'm on probation and I don't have a license now, I'm still going to do what I'm going to do. So I'm driving. Now I'm out shoplifting, driving, and using. So I get pulled over. I go to jail for theft, driving on suspended, and a violation of probation. Well, on the theft and the violation, they said, well, we'll put you on house arrest. And I thought, well, that's all right. I'll get a job down at the bar. And that's what I did. I get a job at the bar. Now I'm selling weed. I'm using. I'm on probation and house arrest. And I don't have a driver's
tell him
license.
what to do.
Yeah, I'm not trying to hear that. So they get tired of that, and they come in my house, and they find a bunch of marijuana, and they lock me up. Well, you think that'd be the end of it? No, that's just the beginning. I decide I don't want to be in jail no more. I don't have a bond, so I escape. I stay gone about 18 months. They catch me, and now I come here. So I was exercising all kinds of close thinking.
Okay, so you were kind of engrossed in it. That was your style of life. Wasn't just an incident, right?
You weren't going to tell me anything.
Okay. Now, you also came back from break yesterday and said, and I realize I still have to deal with close thinking even while I'm here. You want to continue that one?
We talked about that my freedom is less important than self-control, and I have a hard time with that. And even though I realize that what you were saying was right and made more sense than my view on it, I have a hard time admitting that you were right.
You had a hard time. You had a hard time all night with that last night, didn't you?
Still having a hard time with it.
Yeah.
And self-honesty, as I'm listening, self-honesty has something to do, self-control has something to do with self-honesty too.
Mm-hmm. Want to say more about that?
Well, I'm just thinking if I place freedom over my self-honesty, I can be making freedom an object.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of something I'm in a relationship with the people I love.
It's just kind of hard to put
Anything above freedom.
anything
right
above when you're sitting in this cell and I'm gonna watch you go home and he's gonna go home, which you didn't put yourself here, I put myself here. But it's still hard to say that anything is more important than my freedom.
So it's hard to swallow.
I still can't get it down.
But you're working. Well, you got about 60 more days to work on it. Think you can get it swallowed by then?
I think I'm gonna swallow it.
He goes home in 60 days. That's why I said that. They responded, I thought, rather well. I met them on one day. We taped the next day, so that was not a lot of time to build rapport, but I thought they did exceptionally well. Let me just give you then a counter to close thinking, and then my son's going to come and share with you some of the sayings of the youthful offenders. The counter to close thinking, we call it calm thinking. And calm thinking, I don't think it's in your book, I'm going to give it to you, is this. And I think he may have an overhead for it by now. No? Okay. It's catch your thinking before you act. One of my clients said that means check it before you wreck it. Catch your thinking before you act. Admit where your thinking could lead. Admit it doesn't always lead there, but where it could lead. Look for a healthy alternative. Look for a healthy alternative. Make a responsible decision. Catch your thinking before you act. Admit where that thinking can lead. Look for a healthy alternative. Make a responsible decision. Now, I want you to understand this, and we will not go through scriptural alternatives for all of these, but there is a scriptural antidote for every one of these. And the most basic scriptural antidote for close thinking, I think, may be found in Psalms 19. That is, if you've got any sense at all, just look out. The heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no language where their voice is not heard. And as you look out and hear that, it says their line has gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world, and there's nothing hid from the intense heat thereof. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. More are they to be desired than riches, yea, than great riches, sweeter than honey in the honeycomb. Moreover, by them is thy servant warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. Who can know the errors of his ways? Cleanse thou me from secret sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then will I be innocent of the great transgressions. And let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my redeemer. In other words, just use the mind that God's given to you, and he testifies all about you. And you go into Proverbs and you find constantly, trust in the Lord with all thy heart, lean not to thine own understanding. Attain your ear unto wisdom and apply your heart to understanding. In other words, seeking advice instead of taking an attitude of not needing advice.
If I go in and tell you what's wrong with you, I'm going to have a hard time getting them to listen to me. If I can tell them, you know what, I do this too, let me tell you how I've learned to counter it. And let me take you to the scripture that has helped me with this. Oh, now we've won an audience. Now we've got some open ears and open minds. For those of you that work with juveniles, we're going to cover just a slightly different angle here. We're going to talk about the sayings of a closed thinker. Some of you guys that don't work with juveniles, it might spill over to you. The street slang is kind of universal. The first thing you'll hear, the reason we say sayings, by the way, is because who here can read minds? We can't read minds, but boy, attitudes are a little bit easier to discern, aren't they? It's a little bit easier to intercept an attitude and say, you know, I think you're displaying an attitude of a closed thinker. But the ultimate way to get this across and to interrupt it and to point it out, pinpoint it, is what comes out of your mouth. Remember the actions in our therapeutic model? That's going to reveal what's going on back here in this brain. So what comes out of your mouth? Well, the first one is, ain't nobody going to tell me nothing, no how. That comes from Stuart Briscoe, by the way. Ain't nobody going to tell me nothing, no how. Can't nobody tell me what to do. Matter of fact, you ain't my mama or my daddy. Boy, if I heard this once, I've heard it 100 times. Between DOC and group home experience, you ain't my daddy. And I'm glad of it, I'd want to say. You know? And what are they saying? Look, I don't even listen to my daddy. Fool, what makes you think I'm going to listen to you? Can't nobody tell me nothing. I'm so far beyond listening to you. They used to say it like this, talk to the hand. Man, I wish that would have stayed around. That was so easy to pick on closed thinking. Here they got their hand extended, showing, keep that advice there to yourself. Don't even come my way with it. Keep it at arm's distance. It's like those old submarines. They've got a movie out now where they're doing some deep sea diving in those old scuba diving suits, and they have the metal, the brass helmet, right? Boy, that's closed thinking. And I love to picture that, draw on that picture of having on a brass helmet with a little bitty peephole, and a little bit of information can trickle in, and I can see the world through my little filter, but there ain't nothing getting in or out. Can't nobody tell me nothing. I decide on what's good and what's bad, and what advice I need and what advice I don't need. Closed thinking is like putting that helmet on. Another one is, this is stupid. You need to go to thinking area class. You need to go to cognitive rule. This is stupid. This is gay. This is dumb. Oh, how many, and they're just trying to get you disarmed and saying, I'm not even going to try this. This isn't even worth my time. I'm not going to open my mind up to the possibility that there is an inkling of worthwhileness in what you're doing. Whatever. We did this training a few weeks ago at the place where my wife works, and she sat in on it and came home. She said, you use some of those tactics because that's my favorite. Whatever. Okay, I'm mad. I'm shut down. My emotions are high. Whatever. Don't tell. I'm not going to discuss it anymore. You're right. I'm wrong. Whatever. Finally, we need to shut down our anger and open up our mind. 1994, O.J. Simpson. Who remembers the slow chase? You guys remember that? That should instantly bring to your mind a picture of a white Bronco going down the highway. Some of those pictures they showed on TV had the cars, the police cars. But most of the pictures, they just focused in on that white Bronco slowly going down the road. Right? No other cars, nothing around it. Not taking any exits, not making any U-turns, not pulling over to the side, going one way down that highway. And there ain't nothing going to change my mind. I'm not going anywhere else. And when I'm angry and I'm hot, boy, I'm fueled like that, aren't I? Can't nothing get me to turn around and go. And if self-destruction is what is at the end of that highway, so be it, because I'm hot. And you can't tell me what to do now. So we look at what can we do to shut down our anger and open up our mind. I like to use the analogy of my billfold. What's in my billfold?
Money.
Huh?
Money.
Because you paid me some on break, right?
Your ID.
My ID, what else? Pictures. What else? Huh? Credit cards. Driver's license, huh?
Personal stuff.
Personal stuff, okay. Now I got a question for you. How do you know?
That's where I got mine.
You're making an educated guess. But how do you know what's in here? This bad boy is closed. Huh? That's what you got in yours, and you're making an educated guess, and you're probably not far off, but the fact is it's a guess because my billfold is closed. And not only is it closed, I keep it where you can't even see it. Right? I keep it back here hidden. Now, remember, this is an analogy for our mind. When my mind is closed, why would I do that? What's the advantage? Protection.
Can't nothing get out.
Can't nothing get in, can't nothing get out. I'm safe. My billfold is safe in my back pocket. My mind is safe, closed. Ultimate protection. Can't nobody derail me. And if I've been abused and neglected my whole life, if I have found those results to be nasty and painful, boy, it's a whole lot easier to just tuck this thing away and say, ain't nobody getting in, ain't nobody getting out. All right? And these type of closed thinkers will sit in a group with their arms folded, not giving you any problems at all. It's not, because there ain't nothing coming in or out. And other types of closed thinkers will argue with everything you say, because you got to be wrong and they got to be right. And closed thinkers will go headlong against those results because the thinking box on that therapeutic model is blacked out. There ain't nothing changing my thinking. Pharaoh was a closed thinker. Couldn't nothing change his closed thinking. Destroyed his nation, killed his family, but there wasn't nothing changing his mind. Now, so if we're telling people we've got to open our mind, ooh, what's this? Say that louder, please.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. You're absolutely right. This is vulnerable. This is uncomfortable. This is icky. If I walk around like this, I'm going to lose something. If I'm lucky enough to lose it, odds are somebody's going to take it. Right? Same way when I open up my mind, and boy, y'all, I tell you, when you work with juveniles, they're ruthless, aren't they? I'm lucky today. My wife gave me my allowance last night, but most of the time I open this up and there's no money in there, no skrill. So what they say? They start making fun of me, right? You're broke, you know? And what happens, you know, if you see my pictures and you start making fun of my godson or my wife or whatever? It's uncomfortable. It's vulnerable. Who likes that pain? Okay? So I use this analogy because we have to understand that if we're going to get out of closed thinking and we're going to open our mind, we've got to be honest with them. Don't sell them something that doesn't work. Tell them it's going to be painful. It's going to hurt for a little while. But unlike that dog chasing its tail, going around in circles, avoiding pain, you're going to be moving in the opposite direction toward ultimate meaning and fulfillment and a real sense of purpose in your life. So open thinking, like all responsible living, is sometimes mundane, boring, and very often painful. But in the end, it brings a sense of satisfaction, of meaning, and purpose. Okay, so be honest with your offenders when you're dealing with them and you're sharing these type of things with them.